My fork hovered midair, lamb chop dripping with rosemary glaze, when my brother's voice cut across the table like a bottle shattering in a quiet room. "Well, I guess they don't teach coordination in rehab, huh?" Everyone at the table laughed, except me. I stared down at my plate, suddenly unsure if I'd imagined it. The air got thick, clotted with the kind of awkwardness that doesn't surface at first. It settles later, in the bathroom mirror or the elevator ride home. But I felt it already crawling across my skin like ants. "Micah," my mother said lightly, pouring herself more wine, "don't be so mean to your sister." "Just teasing," he replied, smirking in my direction like he was doing me a favor by including me in his repertoire of mockery. My jaw tensed. My grip on the fork tightened, but I didn't respond. If I said something, it would be me being overly sensitive again. That's how it always went. He threw the match, and I was blamed for the fire. So instead, I chewed the lamb. It was overcooked. Dry. Micah reached for the breadbasket like nothing happened, and the others went on, talking about football, his new car, how his golden retriever had its own Instagram. The rhythm of family, but dissonant. And I sat there, a mute chord, pretending the burn in my throat was wine. The dinner had been my mother's idea. She wanted to celebrate my promotion, director of product strategy at an AI startup. Series A just closed, 15 million raised. She'd printed out the press release and tucked it beside the place settings like a school report card. As if finally, at 35, I had done something worth clapping for. "Lena's company got picked up in Tech Week," she announced earlier in the evening, waving her phone around. "Isn't that amazing, Micah?" He'd shrugged. "Everyone's in tech now. You can get on Tech Week if you know someone." He knew I didn't. I'd clawed for every inch, but it wasn't the shrug or the sarcasm. I could stomach those. This was different. He'd made fun of my disability. The nerve damage that sometimes made my left hand tremble like a leaf, the result of a rare autoimmune disorder that flared in my late 20s and nearly paralyzed me. I looked across the table at him. My brother, Micah, 2 years younger, all charm and confidence. He wore success like a tailor-made jacket. Real estate ventures, CrossFit, perfect teeth, fiancée named Brittany who giggled on cue and posted daily motivation quotes on Instagram. I'd sat through years of his jabs. Lena, the intense one, the quiet one, the weirdly smart one. But tonight wasn't teasing. It was a gut punch, and it came dressed as a joke. My father passed the potatoes like none of it registered. My mother asked if anyone wanted more green beans. No one spoke of the tremor, the humiliation. No one said it was wrong. And when my mother lit the dessert candle, cinnamon and sugar cookie, it felt more like incense at a wake. I excused myself before cake. No one stopped me. I walked to the guest bathroom and locked the door, staring at my reflection. The light above the mirror flickered. One side of my face was slightly shadowed. I looked like I was halfway in, halfway gone. On the sink sat a soap dish shaped like a seashell, the kind we used to collect at Long Beach as kids. I picked it up, traced the ridges. My hand shook. Not because of the disease this time, but because I was furious. At him, at them, at myself for not screaming. I remembered the mug, a cheap ceramic thing I'd made in 3rd grade. Lena's ideas, written in blue glaze, crooked and proud. It sat forgotten in their garage now, packed away with art projects and baby shoes. I had asked about it once during a visit. My mother had said, "Oh, I think we donated that." I set the soap dish down carefully. Too carefully. My hands still trembled. I took a breath, then another. I stared at my face until I could name the anger without choking on it. Then I walked back out. The cake was being served. Brittany was posting something. My brother was already on his 2nd glass of red. No one looked up. I sat down and said nothing. And for the rest of the meal, I smiled, nodded, and chewed. But something had cracked. It wasn't just about the tremor or the joke or even the laughter that followed. It was the realization that I was always expected to play along, to smile through it, to prove I wasn't the bitter one. That was the label I feared most. Bitter. Ungrateful. Fragile. Micah could punch, and I had to thank him for teaching me how to take it. No more. On the drive home, I didn't listen to music. I let the silence settle. My phone buzzed once, my mother texting me a photo of the family at dinner, me included, mid-laugh. I hadn't laughed. It was just my face between blinks. I didn't reply. By the time I got home, the idea was already forming. I wouldn't confront him directly. That would be predictable. No, if I was going to reclaim something, it wouldn't be with noise. It would be with clarity. I put the mug on the kitchen shelf when I got home, not the childhood one. They donated that. But the new one, it said "Build or Burn" in block letters, a gift for my co-founder when we closed our first angel round. I touched the rim. Cold ceramic, still whole. My hand didn't shake. It wouldn't be fire this time. It would be architecture. Precision. I'd give them a performance they couldn't unsee. It began with a message I'd never thought I'd send. My name is Lena Hartley. I'm 35, a founding partner and director of product strategy at a generative AI startup in San Francisco. I live alone in a rent-controlled condo in Hayes Valley, with 3 potted plants I haven't killed, and a view of the freeway that looks poetic at sunset if you squint. People think of San Francisco as the city where dreams are either funded or eaten alive. They're not wrong. For 10 years, I was both starving and dreaming. Pitch decks at midnight, ramen 5 nights a week, and long walks home with my left hand cramping so badly I had to hold it in my jacket pocket just to hide the tremor. It started one spring, years ago, small spasms in my fingers while typing, barely noticeable. Then, slowly my muscles betrayed me. They told me it might be stress. Then it wasn't. After a battery of tests, blank stares, and clinical shrugs, I finally had a name: multifocal motor neuropathy. Rare, chronic, manageable, if I was lucky. Micah thought I was exaggerating. You always were kind of dramatic, he'd said over lunch once, pushing his sunglasses up on his head like he was the reasonable one in a courtroom drama. Have you tried, like, acupuncture or something? I tried everything. But nothing annoyed me more than the people who thought I wanted pity. I didn't want pity. I wanted acknowledgement. Quiet, sincere acknowledgement. But that wasn't something my family dealt in. Our childhood had been polished on the outside, splintered on the inside. My father was one of those work-hard, never-cry men who only hugged us on Christmas morning. My mother handled emotions like she handled fragile china, admired from afar, never touched. And Micah, he learned early that attention was his currency. He could charm guests, recite baseball stats, throw tantrums with flair. I, on the other hand, was praised for being low maintenance. The gifted kid who made straight A's and tied her own shoes by age 3. Lena's easy, my mom used to say, like I was a brand of rice. But I wasn't easy. I was quiet because I had to be. Every time I raised a complaint, it got flattened into my personality. Don't be so sensitive. Why do you always assume the worst? Eventually, I stopped talking about my needs. I became what they wanted. Quiet, useful, not a burden. That's how I survived, until I didn't. The disability forced me into a confrontation I wasn't ready for. It happened during a pitch meeting. I was mid-slide explaining market segmentation when my hand jerked and knocked over a water glass. I tried to laugh it off, but the look on the investor's face told me everything. Weakness registers fast in this world. Afterward, my co-founder pulled me aside. You don't have to lead every pitch, Lena. I wanted to scream. Instead, I went to the bathroom and cried into a paper towel, the kind that dissolves before it can even do its job. But then, something changed. A week later, a Stanford neuroethics professor published a piece on TechCrunch referencing our AI's framework as an example of human-informed machine learning. My inbox exploded. Investors who'd ghosted us resurfaced. NPR requested a pre-interview. The mug came a few days after the article, build or burn, in thick black font from Sam, my co-founder. He didn't say anything, just handed it to me during a coffee break and went back to debugging. It was the first time I felt seen at work, not just for my vision, but for surviving in silence. Still, that didn't matter to my family. At the dinner that night, they hadn't asked about the TechCrunch piece. They hadn't asked about the disability. They hadn't even asked about how I was living alone with unpredictable motor function. But they'd grilled me about why I wasn't dating anyone. You're too picky, my mom said. You work too much, Brittany chimed in, not unkindly, just cluelessly. And Micah, knife poised over his steak, smirked. Maybe she's waiting for someone who doesn't mind carrying her groceries. I wish I could say that was the worst thing he ever said to me. It wasn't. Once when we were kids, I'd built a model city for the science fair. Hours of cutting cardboard and painting roads. The night before the fair, he accidentally knocked it off the table while reaching for cereal. My parents made him apologize, but never replaced what he broke. That was the beginning. There were more. Shredding my college acceptance letter as a prank, using my disability parking placard as a joke in front of his friends, calling my therapist a life coach for the emotionally overinvested. My parents never intervened. They said, that's just how boys are. Or worse, he's your brother. But the worst wasn't the moments themselves. It was that, eventually, I believed them. I believed that being mocked was just something I had to endure in order to keep peace. I believed that needing help made me weak. I believed that being smart wasn't enough, that I needed to be charming like Micah to deserve a seat at the table. That belief broke the night of the dinner. And in the fracture, something new began to take shape. A week later, I was at a networking event in Berkeley when I ran into her, Jillian. She used to be engaged to Micah 5 years ago. Back when he still worked in commercial leasing and wore cologne that made your eyes water. They'd split suddenly. No one in the family ever talked about it, just like we never talked about my diagnosis. She was standing near a cluster of founders, glass of rosé in hand, laughing. Her posture was more relaxed than I remembered. She was wearing flats, not heels. Her hair was streaked with silver, intentional and striking. I approached cautiously. "Jillian?" She turned. "Lena?" And then she smiled, real and unguarded. God, it's been years. We sat in a corner of the event space, away from the investors and the noise. I told her what I'd been working on. She told me she was managing partnerships for a sustainability tech firm. We talked for almost 2 hours. No small talk, just curiosity. Eventually, I said it. "I don't know if this is a terrible idea," I began, "but would you come with me to my parents' next dinner?" She raised an eyebrow. "Is this some kind of ploy to make Micah uncomfortable?" I shrugged. "Maybe, but mostly, I just want to bring someone who sees me, who knows the whole picture." She took a sip of wine, considering. "You always were the one worth watching." He hated that. That was the first time I heard someone say it out loud. We exchanged numbers. She texted later that night to confirm. "I'm in. Let's burn some legacy narratives." I looked at the mug. Build or burn. I was done asking to be understood. I was going to show them. The moment I saw Jillian step out of her car in front of my parents' house, I knew I hadn't made a mistake. She wore a deep burgundy blouse, dark jeans, and simple earrings. Nothing flashy, nothing performative. But her presence was undeniable. Grounded, elegant. Not the wide-eyed, half-apologizing version of her I remembered from years ago, when she was always adjusting to Micah's mood shifts like she was balancing on a fault line. "Are you ready?" she asked, locking her car and slipping her phone into a small clutch. I nodded. My fingers were steady. No tremors today. Inside, the house smelled like roast chicken and sage. My mother still insisted on elaborate family meals once a month, even though no one enjoyed them anymore. It was tradition, she claimed. A way to stay close, though the table often felt more like a theater set than anything real. "Lena, sweetheart," my mother called from the kitchen, voice already laced with mild panic. "You're early." "Oh, and you brought someone?" Micah was in the dining room, leaning against the table. His face slackened when he saw Jillian behind me. For a half-second, I saw the flicker of disorientation. Then he smiled, all surface. "Wow, this is unexpected." Jillian stepped forward with the calm of someone who already knows the outcome. "Hi, Micah. Good to see you." He blinked. "You look different." "You look exactly the same," she replied, breezy. My mother came bustling in, eyes darting. "Jillian? My goodness, what a surprise! Are you too?" She trailed off. Her expression couldn't settle between politeness and suspicion. I smiled. "I invited her. We ran into each other at an event last week. She's in sustainability tech now. We had a lot to catch up on." Brittany appeared behind Micah, her arms stiff at her sides. She looked at Jillian like a ghost had wandered into her bridal shower. Dinner was tense. My father poured too much wine. My mother overcompensated with brittle cheer. "So Jillian, still working in PR?" "Actually, I lead partnerships at Solar Choice," she said, gently correcting. "We just finalized a deal with the city to transition public schools to green energy." "Oh wow," my mother said, clearly unsure what to do with that. "That sounds complicated." Jillian smiled. "The good things usually are." Micah kept quiet, chewing like he was trying not to bite his tongue. I hadn't told Jillian what to say. I hadn't planned anything specific. All I wanted was her presence, the contrast. Someone in the room who had once been inside Micah's orbit and chose to leave it. My mother turned to me halfway through the salad course. "So Lena, how's the artificial intelligence project going?" I paused, setting down my fork. "We just signed a partnership with a healthcare group in New York. They're integrating our predictive modeling into early diagnostic tools." There was silence. Then Micah said, "I don't know how I feel about computers telling people they're dying." Jillian looked at him. "It's not about replacing doctors, it's about catching things earlier so fewer people die." He didn't respond. It was subtle. No raised voices, no scenes, just the quiet disassembly of his usual authority in the room. The power had shifted, and everyone could feel it, even if they couldn't name it. I watched Brittany lean toward Micah and whisper something. He shook his head. The chicken was dry. The rice was clumped. My mother's centerpiece was a candle wreath she'd recycled from Thanksgiving. But none of that mattered. The real show was unspoken. After dessert, some store-bought pie with fake whipped cream, we moved to the living room. Jillian and I sat on the couch while the rest arranged themselves like chess pieces in retreat. Micah couldn't take it anymore. "So, Lena," he said, louder than necessary, "you brought Jillian to prove what exactly? That you have friends now?" There it was. I looked at him slowly. "No, I brought her because she's smart and kind and I value her company. That used to be enough for you. He scoffed. You always play the victim. Jillian's voice was even. No, Micah, she just finally stopped playing your foil. My father cleared his throat. Let's not. No, Jillian said, not turning. I think this should be said. She leaned forward. You never really liked that Lena had substance, that she built something with actual impact, that she didn't need a hype man to be taken seriously. Micah opened his mouth but no words came out. Do you remember, Jillian continued, that weekend in Tahoe when she offered to help edit your investment deck and you laughed because she didn't get real estate? Then you used her edits anyway? My mother stiffened. That's not fair. It's accurate, I said quietly. Micah looked at me then, eyes hard. So what, now you think you're better than us? No, I said, I think I'm done pretending I'm less. Silence, the kind that fills an entire house, not just a room. Jillian stood. Thanks for dinner, Lena, you ready? I nodded. As we walked to the door, my mother followed. Lena, you don't have to do this. I turned. You're right, I don't. On the drive back, Jillian was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, that wasn't about revenge, was it? No, I said. It was about contrast. I needed them to see what they'd dismissed. She nodded. You didn't just bring me. You brought a mirror. We didn't say much after that. She dropped me off, hugged me at the curb. Inside I sat with my mug. The build or burn one. I rinsed it, dried it carefully and placed it on the top shelf of the display cabinet my parents gave me when I moved into the condo. It used to house trophies. Now it held something better. Proof of a quiet rebellion. And the next day, everything changed. The following morning, I woke to 57 notifications. At first, I thought it was a glitch, some internal Slack bot gone rogue. But when I opened my email and saw the subject line, "Your AI startup is the future of healthcare, let's talk," I froze. Then another ping. Then another. NPR's Tech Lens podcast had dropped their feature on our platform overnight. I'd done the interview weeks ago, thinking they might cut most of it or angle it towards Sam, our CEO. But they didn't. In fact, I was the voice of the episode. They used my quote, the one about empathy, as a technology constraint. And they used my name, Lena Hartley. Not just co-founder, vision architect, a woman whose left hand sometimes betrayed her but whose ideas didn't. I listened to the whole 28 minutes in one sitting, coffee going cold. And when it ended, I just sat there, hand cupped around that same chipped ceramic mug. By noon, 3 investors had reached out directly to me, not Sam. One of them, someone who'd ghosted us last year, wrote, I missed the forest for the tremor. Let's fix that. I forwarded the message to Sam with no comment. He replied with a string of fire emojis and a, you want me to handle this, or shall I pull up your throne? That night, I received a text from my mother. Your father and I listened to the podcast. Your father says you sounded very clear and professional. I agree, we're proud, should have said it sooner. I stared at the screen for a while. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of years spent trying to be heard through a wall of passive admiration for Micah, but it was the closest she'd ever come. I typed back, thanks, I've been saying these things for a long time. No emoji, no period, just fact. 2 days later, she invited me over for a small Sunday lunch. Just us this time, no plus ones. I accepted. When I arrived, the dining table was bare, save for one thing. The mug. My mug. Not build or burn. Not the new one, the old one. Crooked and messy, Lena's ideas in childish cobalt lettering. They'd found it. Or maybe they'd never donated it like she said. Maybe they just didn't know what it meant. Your father found this in a box with the Christmas ornaments, my mother said casually, setting out a plate. I thought it might look better on the mantel than the shelf in the garage. I didn't say anything at first. I walked over, lifted it gently. The glaze had faded, a little chipped along the rim, but it was mine. And now it had been moved from the shadows of nostalgia to the visible architecture of their home. I forgot how heavy it was, I said. It's ceramic, my father replied, like that explained everything. We ate in a quiet sort of comfort, the kind that comes after something breaks and isn't quite repaired but is at least acknowledged. Halfway through lunch, my mother asked, will this AI thing help people like you? I nodded. That's the point. She didn't reply, but I saw her throat tighten. My father passed the water pitcher. Just don't let anyone tell your story better than you can, he said, eyes fixed on the glass. It was the closest he'd ever come to a blessing. That week, the photo from dinner, the one where I wasn't really laughing, got posted to the family WhatsApp. My mother captioned it, our brilliant girl and a beautiful night. I didn't correct her, but Micah did. A few hours later, he left the group. No message, just the usual digital flouts. Brittany stayed. She sent me a heart emoji, then a separate text. I'm sorry. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened LinkedIn and published a short post. Sometimes the things we're mocked for are the very tools we use to build our legacy. I used to hide my hand under tables. Now I sign term sheets with it. We don't have to shout. We just have to keep building. Someone will notice. It got 3,000 likes in 2 days. One comment stood out. Proud to have stood beside you. The world's listening now. The world was listening, and for once, it wasn't through Micah's filter. At the next family event, my niece's 6th birthday, I noticed the mug again, still on the mantel, polished this time. Not front and center, but placed next to a small ceramic lighthouse from Cape Cod and my dad's coin jar. That was their way. Subtle placement. Quiet elevation. Micah was there, but he didn't say much. Just nodded in my direction once, expression unreadable. Jillian hadn't returned his calls. I knew because she told me. She'd moved on, and he hated things he couldn't charm back into orbit. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The vindication wasn't in his silence. It was in the way my niece came up to me later, tugged on my sleeve, and asked, "Did you really make a robot that talks?" I laughed. Sort of. She looked impressed. "I want to make one that tells jokes." "You will," I said, "and I'll help." In the rearview mirror that night, the house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it always had been. I touched the mug in my passenger seat. Not the old one. I'd left that behind, but the build or burn one. My talisman. My reminder that even clay can carry fire. 2 months passed, the podcast exposure turned into panel invitations. Then came an op-ed I published on Wired about ethical AI and embodied resilience. I didn't think anyone would notice it outside of tech circles, but they did. The morning after it went live, my inbox held a message with a subject line I read 3 times. CBS Mornings, guest segment inquiry. I blinked. Then I laughed. Not out of disbelief, but because somewhere deep in the rusted-out chambers of my childhood kitchen, I heard my brother's voice again. No one listens to Lena. She's just intense. Apparently, intensity made for good TV. I didn't tell my family right away, not because I wanted it to be a surprise, but because I needed it to be mine. My narrative. Unfiltered. No pre-commentary from my mother, no awkward silence from my father, no raised eyebrow texts from Micah. On the day of the segment, I wore a deep green dress Jillian had picked out. I remembered standing in her living room as she adjusted the sleeve at the shoulder saying, "This color reads like strategy, not apology." She was right. The studio lights were hot, but the host was kind. We talked about machine learning, health equity, and how my own experience with a rare chronic illness had informed our product. I spoke clearly and slowly, not because of nerves, but because for once I wanted every word to land. After the taping, the host took my hand, my left hand, and said, "Thank you for being exactly who you are on camera and off." No one had ever said that to me before. When the segment aired, my phone vibrated until it passed away. Sam called to say a Fortune 100 company had just booked a meeting with us. One of our earliest investors emailed, "This is the kind of founder story we hoped for when we bet on you." But it was my mother's voicemail that played first. "Sweetheart, we saw you. You look so calm, so sure. I don't know if I ever told you, but when you were little, you used to write ideas on napkins and tape them to the fridge. You said you were making the world safer for moms who forget things. I found one the other day. It was still legible. We kept it." I didn't cry. I just stood there in the middle of my kitchen, barefoot, tea cooling in my hand, letting her words play again and again. Micah didn't reach out, but he showed up, in a way. That Sunday when I visited for lunch, the family photo wall had been rearranged. There were fewer graduation caps, more candid moments, and right in the middle, beneath my niece's crayon masterpiece and above my parents' anniversary trip to Vancouver, was a still from the CBS segment. Me on set, backlit, mid-sentence. I paused in front of it. My father came up behind me. "Your mother printed it. I wanted the one where you were smiling, but she said this one showed you in motion." "In motion," I repeated. He nodded. "That's the version they missed when you were growing up." I turned to him. "Did you?" He sighed. "I thought stillness meant peace. I didn't realize it could mean survival." We stood there a moment longer. Then he handed me a new mug, brand new, still warm from the dishwasher. It was simple, white, with navy lettering. "Lena, period," that was all it said. I smiled. "You're not funny," I told him. He shrugged. "It's true." Micah wasn't at lunch. I'd heard through Brittany, who was now taking space, that he'd been struggling. That real estate had cooled, that he'd had to return one of his investment properties. I didn't take pleasure in that, but I also didn't extend a lifeline. Let him sit in the silence he created. Afterward, I returned home, placed the new mug on the shelf beside the old one, and turned on the kettle. That night, my niece video called me. "I showed your robot to my class," she said, beaming. I told them you used to get made fun of, but now you're famous. I'm not famous, I laughed. Just visible. She tilted her head. What's the difference? I thought about it. Famous means people know your face. Visible means they finally heard your voice. She nodded like she understood more than I expected. Before she hung up, she held something up to the camera, a napkin with scribbles on it. I'm taping it to the fridge, she said. Like you did. I smiled. Good idea. And that night, as I lay in bed, tea beside me, rain softly against the window, I let myself feel it. Not triumph exactly, but weightlessness. The slow lift of decades spent proving I was worthy of the space I took up. Micah's mockery hadn't broken me. It had named the fight I was already winning. And now, when I heard my name, on a podcast in a boardroom from a child's lips, it didn't sound like something borrowed or begrudged. It sounded like mine. It sounded right. It sounded whole. That night, I brewed chamomile in the mug my father gave me. It felt lighter than the others, even though I knew it wasn't. Perception plays tricks like that. When something feels earned, it carries differently. I sat by the window, watching the traffic wash past, tiny red blinks receding into dark. The city hummed its usual lullaby of late-night footsteps and distant horns. I used to hate that sound. Now it sounded like proof that life continued, no matter who laughed or stayed silent. The shelf held 3 mugs now. The crooked one I made with my small, stubborn hands. The sharp-edged one that reminded me I didn't have to choose between building and burning. And this last one, the simplest of all, a name and a period, a full stop, a sentence that doesn't need permission to end. There would still be days when my hand trembled, when I'd doubt myself, when someone in a meeting would glance at my fingers instead of my face. But those were just moments. They weren't definitions. I've learned that silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's precision, a held breath before a truth lands exactly where it needs to. I am Lena, and I am finally heard.